Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to the Student Research Seminar 2021. I'm Swati and I'll be your host for the evening. This is a monthly event which is aimed at showcasing the research that is being done by ISC onto a public platform. Today, we have two very interesting talks lined up for you by PhD students of EC department. Before we begin, for the record, I would like to know how many of you are IEEE members. So, if you could go ahead and raise your hand, please. Okay. Yeah, thank you. You may unraise your hands. Now, without further ado, let us begin our first talk of the event, which is titled Integrated Optic Few More Devices on Thin Film Lithium Niobate by Dr. Archana K. Archana holds a PhD degree in integrated photonics from the Department of ECIISC. She also holds BE in telecommunication engineering and MTech in digital communication and networking from Vishveshwaraya Technological University, Belgaum. She secured university ranked 10th and 1st respectively in the above mentioned programs. She is also a recipient of the 2015 Vishveshwaraya PhD Fellowship from Ministry of Electronics and IT from the Government of India. She has a teaching experience of 8 years in engineering colleges, teaching UG students. She has been a research scholar at IISc in the Department of ECE from 2015 to 2021 and has recently defended her thesis titled Integrated Optic Devices on Thin Film Lithium Niobate for Few Mode Optical Communications. Her research interests include mode hybridization and multimode devices on lithium niobate. Welcome, Archana, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Swati. I hope you are able to hear me.
Yes, we are able to hear you.
All right, let me share my screen. Good evening, everyone. Today I'll be presenting a talk on integrated optic waveguides on emerging platform of thin film lithium niobate. As we all know, there is an explosive demand for bandwidth, and multiple approaches have been used in order to meet this requirement. And today we'll be discussing one particular technique of multiplexing in brief. And then,
Archana, your screen is not visible. Have you shared it yet?
yes, let me do
Can
it again.
anyone else see the screen?
Not yet.
Just a minute.
Yeah, it's visible now.
All right. So today we'll be discussing briefly about mode division multiplexing, and then we'll move on to find out what kind of devices will be useful in order to implement this multiplexing scheme. So this will be the flow of my presentation. We'll start with a quick introduction and then move on to what is the need for developing multimode waveguides, and also see a comparative and parametric analysis of multimode waveguides in terms of different performance parameters, and then study an interesting phenomenon called mode hybridization. So this part of the presentation will be a bit generic. Then the second part will be a bit more technical, where we design a special kind of waveguide called as zero birefringence waveguides, and then we'll conclude the session. So this slide shows several approaches that have been used in order to increase the capacity of a single mode optical fiber link. So multiplexing schemes have been used, like time division multiplexing, wavelength division multiplexing, and space division multiplexing, where space division multiplexing is garnering a very large research interest these days. WDM is a scheme where the individual carriers will be multiplexed using multiple wavelengths, which means you need a tunable laser that is expensive. Well, let's see what is space division multiplexing. This can be implemented in different methods. The first approach is to use the conventional single mode fibers, while each single mode fiber carries the visual data channel. We can also club multiple single mode fibers into multiple single cores into a single fiber, and then use it for increasing the capacity. Another approach, which we call it as mode division multiplexing, is to use a multi-mode fiber itself. So you can see that the diameter of the fiber is large so that it can support multiple number of modes compared to a single mode fiber. So you have a multi-mode fiber that supports hundreds of modes, but it is not possible to use all of them to multiplex or to carry the data because of the phenomenon called intermodal dispersion. And this limits the data rate at which you can transmit depending on the number of modes. So the one of the alternative is to use a few mode fiber. So this is an intermediate solution between single mode and multi-mode. So when we cannot use hundreds of modes, let's use a few modes. So this few can be as large as 20 modes. And this kind of multiplexing is MDM, which needs the following devices for its implementation, like multi-mode waveguides, modulators, amplifiers, and also mode manipulating devices like multiplexers as well as mode converters. Now, there is also a trend in so that we can go for hybrid multiplexing schemes where you use both MDM as well as WDM simultaneously in order to double the capacity. There is another multiplexing scheme called as polarization division multiplexing. So we generally use either a transverse magnetic mode or a transverse electric mode in communication. But if you implement PDM, it is possible that we use both the polarization simultaneously, thereby increasing the capacity further. So this is MDM in brief. So it makes use of orthogonal modes of the waveguides as independent carriers. The advantage is that you need a single laser and you don't have to go for an expensive tunable laser which uses multiple wavelengths. So the individual data streams will be modulated onto a different mode and then transmitted through a few mode waveguide. This shows the block diagram of an MDM system. The light from the laser diode is split into n number of n number of branches, where n is the number of modes that we'll be using, and each output from the splitter will be used for modulating the signals. And then, except the fundamental mode, rest of the higher order modes will be converted. Rest of the modes will be converted to higher order modes and then multiplex. So now that you have a multiplexed signal, we also need a waveguide that supports all these modes, and such kind of waveguide is a multi-mode waveguide. So in today's talk, we'll be discussing more on the multi-mode waveguide. So the talk will be mostly concentrated on the different types of multi-mode waveguides and also a particular type of multi-mode waveguide for specialty applications. So after you get the multiplex signal on the receiving side, so we go for mode conversion back to fundamental mode, and then it will be detected by the photodetectors. So this is for on-chip mode division multiplexing. The space division multiplexing, which has been used for optical fiber communication, is the idea which will be implemented for on-chip communication also. So a photonic integrated circuit is very similar to an electronic integrated circuit, and it has multiple light controlling components like waveguides, couplers, the sources, detectors, as well as modulators. And the next question is, on which platform do we do this? There are a plethora of platforms available for photonic applications. The most popular and the competing ones being silicon and insulator and lithium niobate-on insulator. The lithium niobate-on insulator is a relatively new platform, and this is how the wafer looks. The substrate can be silicon or LN. On top of that, we have 2 to 3 micrometer thickness of silicon dioxide, which we call it as the buried oxide layer. And then is the guiding layer, which is lithium niobate, and that could be 300 to 900 nanometer thick. So why lithium niobate? It's because of its very interesting properties and From the diagram, you can see that it makes an excellent platform for integrated optics. So the first property being a very wide optical range, transparency range, which covers a wavelength span of 350 nanometer to 5200 nanometer. And the other important one being the strong electro-optic effect, which is very important for the implementation of modulators as well as switches. And this is the reason why lithium niobate has always been the workhorse in such applications. These are the configurations in which we'll be designing multi-mode waveguides. So basically, you have a waveguide that supports more than one mode. In our case, it is 4 modes. And the 3 popular configurations are buried, rip, and strip waveguide. In the buried configuration, you have the guiding layer completely surrounded by silicon dioxide. In the rip configuration, you have shoulders and then the guiding part. In the strip part, it is almost same as the buried waveguide, but the top layer is air. The geometries could be different. So in order to support higher order modes, we either increase the height, in which case we call the waveguide as a tall waveguide. And we can also increase the width of the waveguide, in which case the configuration is set to be wide. And this is the, out of the tall and wide, the wide one is mostly preferred. So these are the mode designations. So in tall waveguides, the modes will be designated as TE0I and TM0I, where I stands for the number of nodes in the vertical direction. So for example, the first mode shows TM00. There is no node in the vertical, neither vertical nor horizontal direction. The next one is TM01. Whether it is TE or TM can be made out by observing the individual field components separately. So for TM01, you have one node in the vertical direction. So the designation is TM01, and so on for the higher order modes. Similarly, for the wide waveguides, we can designate the modes as TE-I0 and TM-I0, where I represents the nodes in the horizontal direction. So the first part, we consider these parameters for the analysis. The effective index, which is defined as the overall index that the mode sees because of different layers in the waveguide. And then the power confinement, which tells us how much of fraction is actually present in the guiding layer when compared to the total area of the waveguide. And the group velocity dispersion, which includes chromatic as well as waveguide dispersion. We also study a bit about intermodal delay and also compare the waveguide cross sections as to which one has a bigger size. So this will be done on different platforms, both LN as well as silicon, so that we get a comparative analysis. So I'll be discussing about only 2 waveguides. This is a strip tall waveguide. The first graph shows the effective index versus waveguide height. One thing that you can observe is the dotted lines are very far from the solid lines, which means the properties or the effective indices of TE modes and TM modes are very different. The other graph, second graph, is the power confinement, which tells us how much of power is present inside the guiding region, which is lithium niobate. The next one is about group velocity dispersion, represented or measured in picosecond per nanometer per kilometer. So the second row of plots is for the same strip waveguide, but on a silicon platform. So you can see that the effective indices are higher in case of silicon because of its larger index contrast. And another thing to observe is the dispersion values. So it's 2000 in case of lithium niobate, whereas it is 12,000 the maximum in case of silicon. So this gives us an idea that a dispersion is much smaller in LN compared to silicon. So this shows parameters for the RIP waveguide. You can see that here the dotted lines which represent TM and the solid lines which represent TE are much closer. So this is a property which we'll be using in designing the next type of waveguides called zero birefringence waveguides. And if you look at the dispersion curves, they are pretty much flat, which are very much desired in many of the applications. And the numbers are also comparable in case of this waveguide, it's 800 and 3000. So this is one design where the silicon comes close to lithium niobate in terms of dispersion. So this is a crowded slide, a table which shows the comparison of different types of waveguides in terms of multiple parameters. So those who are interested can look at this publication. So another parameter is the intermodal delay. So we know that each mode travels at a different group velocity, and when you have a multi-mode waveguide which supports multiple number of modes, each one will be arriving at a different different instant of time. So this results in intermodal group delay, which is a limiting factor of data rate in MDM systems, defined like this. So we have used a multi-mode waveguide that can support 4 modes and consider the difference between the slowest and the fastest mode as the intermodal delay. And these are the results for intermodal group delay. What you can see in the left first graph is about 10 picoseconds. This is for a waveguide of length 1 centimeter on LN, whereas for silicon it is about 52 picoseconds, and so is the case for the tall configuration as well. So overall, we can say that the intermodal delay is much smaller in LN when compared to silicon. There is another region called as mode hybridization region here, which will be discussed in brief after some more slides. So what we could derive from the parametric analysis is that there is no one particular waveguide which gives us the best properties in terms of all parameters. So it depends on the application as to which waveguide is to be selected. For example, if you are looking for a better power confinement and the smallest dispersion, the RIB waveguide would be the best option. And we also know that the cross-sectional area of LNOI waveguides is almost thrice when compared to silicon to support the same number of modes. But the advantage comes in terms of the smaller dispersion and also smaller intermodal group delay. So we just saw the black dotted circles which were showing something called as hybridized modes. I'll not be dealing in too much detail with hybridized mode, but since it is an interesting topic to explore, I'll be giving a glimpse of what they are. So when you have a slab waveguide, the modes are generally, the modes are pure TE modes or TM modes, which means you have one non-zero transverse component, an electric field component. When we build up a channel waveguide where there is confinement in both the transverse directions, then the modes are generally hybrid, which means you have all the 6 field components, EX, EY, EZ, HX, HY, HZ to be non-zero. But then it is possible to classify these modes as quasi-TE or quasi-TM because there will be one dominant transverse electric field component. Whereas in the same channel waveguides, it is also possible to have another type of modes called as hybridized modes, where both the transverse field components of hybridized modes are almost equal. So there is no one dominant component, and hence it is not possible to classify them as QTE or QTM modes. So you can just have a look at the numbers here. The maximum field here, normalized field, is 0.7. This is for the horizontal field component, and so is the case for vertical field component, which means none of them are dominant, and hence it is not possible to classify them as TE or TM, and such modes are called as hybridized modes. It is, we also quantify hybridized modes using a parameter called as TE polarization fraction. So this basically measures how much of electric field is present in the horizontal component when compared to the total electric field in horizontal as well as vertical. If this number is close to 1, it means that there is a large horizontal component, and therefore we call it as a quasi-TE mode. And if this number is close to 0, it means that there is a large vertical component, and we classify the mode as QTM. In case this number lies between 0.4 and 0.6, then such a mode will be called as an H mode or hybridized mode. So, okay, so if you look at the effective index versus waveguide width here, there are crossings, but there are no anti-crossings. So I'll show you the next slide what is an anti-crossing. And if you look at the TE polarization fraction here, So most of them are close to 0 or close to 1, which means you only have QTE or QTM modes in this particular waveguide design. But for the same waveguide, when you plot the effective index with wavelength, you can see that anti-crossings are present here, which are highlighted by red circles, which means the effective index curves come very close, but then they do not cross each other. And it is at this point that we have hybridized modes. All right. So it's the same thing here. I'm showing the TE polarization fraction values here. For these three red dotted circles, the numbers are very close to 0.5, which means there is maximum hybridization. So this is some reasons why it happens between two orthogonally polarized modes. And these are the three conditions which are to be satisfied in order for the hybridized modes to exist. These are formed when the two orthogonally polarized modes have similar effective indices. They have a significant overlap between their mode profiles and the same symmetry for the individual field components. So these are the conditions to be satisfied. And these are some profiles of the hybridized modes. You can see that they are very much different from either TE0 or TM0I or I0 modes. So further details can be found in this publication. So let's move on to the second part of the talk, which is the design of zero birefringence waveguides. So like I mentioned, you could see that these dotted plots are very far from the solid plots, which means the properties of TE and TM modes are quite different in these waveguides. And this is a very common thing in high contrast waveguides like silicon and LN. Now the problem here is you will have to use something called as polarization diversity schemes so that you can handle TM modes and TE modes separately. So what would have been advantageous is that the properties are very close, which means the effective indices of TE and TM modes are close. In that case, you could avoid the polarization diversity schemes, which would increase the size and complexity of the system. So this is where we venture into zero birefringence waveguide. Zero birefringence waveguide means that the effective indices of TE and TM modes are equal, which eliminates the need for polarization diversity schemes. And such waveguides are also useful in hybrid multiplexing schemes, which incorporate both mode as well as polarization multiplexing. And how do we achieve it? There are multiple means of doing it. One is the geometric control of RIB waveguides. You can also do it with buried waveguides. The second option is to have a material index variation in the slot waveguides. So a slot waveguide consists of a low index guiding region sandwiched between two high index guiding regions. So by controlling the index of this low index region, it is possible to achieve a ZBR. And another method is to use subwavelength structures like forming gratings. We could also deposit cladding layers on the waveguide. And by controlling the thickness of the cladding layer, which in turn decides a stress, we could achieve a ZBR. And such methods have already been reported in literature for the fundamental QTE and QTM modes of single mode waveguides. So we can call a waveguide to be single mode when it supports one TE mode and one TM mode. And these are the fundamental modes. So before we move on to the design of zero birefringence waveguides, let's have a quick recap of the properties of LN. So it's an anisotropic material and negative uniaxial. And so it exhibits intrinsic birefringence. This means that the material refractive index depends on the direction in which the wave is propagating and also on its polarization. So this is unlike isotropic material like silicon. So this is the index ellipsoid, which shows the properties of Ln. So X, Y, and Z in capital letters will mean principal axis of the crystal from now on. The small letters X, Y, Z will be representing the coordinate axis. So this is ordinary index along X and Y, whereas the index is extraordinary along along Z. So Z will be the optic axis, which means if the wave is propagating along X, it sees an ordinary index. It is propagating along y, it sees ordinary index. And if it propagates in some arbitrary direction, the index that it sees can be estimated from the index ellipsoid. So in general, as I mentioned before, the waveguides are rectangular and wide in general, which means the width will be larger than height. So you have a multi-mode waveguide which supports TE I0 modes where width is larger than height. So this automatically introduces waveguide birefringence, which means the modes which have a dominant horizontal component see a larger index when compared to the modes that have a smaller, that have a dominant vertical component. So in other words, the TE modes in these waveguides see a larger index, while the TM modes see a smaller index. So there is intrinsic birefringence of the material. There is waveguide birefringence, which is coming from the geometry. So it is possible that you can counteract the waveguide birefringence by using intrinsic birefringence. So if we can do that, then we'll be bringing down the effective index of QTE modes so that it can match up to the effective index of QTM modes. So the method is to assign QTE modes to the extraordinary polarization, because W greater than H makes QTE modes have more effective index. So you want to reduce it, and how do we do it is to assign it along extraordinary polarization. And we know that Ln is negative uniaxial, where NEX is smaller than N ordinary. So which means that you are using an interplay of intrinsic as well as waveguide birefringence. And QTM modes are automatically assigned to the ordinary polarization. So this is the method we'll be using in order to achieve ZVR waveguides. All right. So it's proposed in literature and done for buried waveguides, but only for the fundamental mode pair in LNOI. And they have achieved a birefringence of 0.001. Here is the definition. So we define birefringence as the effective index difference between the corresponding TE and TM modes. For example, delta N0 is the effective index difference between the fundamental modes TE0 and TM0. Similarly, we can define delta N1 as the effective index difference between TE1 and TM1. So this paper also proposes designs which can be used over a large wavelength range from 0.6 to 1.8 micron. But the value of birefringence achieved is it has a lot of scope for improvement. So this is our design. We make use of a RIP waveguide. The dimensions are H is 400 nanometer, and the film thickness is total of 700 nanometer. The waveguide edges are slanted, and the angle is sidewall. This is called as a sidewall angle, and it is 83.5 degrees, which is demonstrated by another group experimentally. And we also designed the waveguide so as to have maximum power confinement for all the guided modes. In our case, it's 4 TE modes. All right, so you can design it for 4 guided modes, but the zero birefringence waveguides that we have designed here is for 2 modes. So it supports 2 TE modes and 2 TM modes. So we also made sure that there are no hybridized modes. They are completely avoided because they could cause crosstalk later. We have ensured that there are no hybridized modes by choosing a TE polarization fraction that is as large as 0.99 for TE and as small as 0.03 for QTM. So to mention again, the capital XYZ indicate the principal axis system of the crystal, whereas small xyz represent the waveguide coordinate system. So these are the results. You can see the effective index versus width plot and see that the dotted line and the solid lines are very, very close. This is for the first set, which is TE0, TM0. This is for the second set, which is TE1 and TM1. And there is a range of width over which these two are overlapping. So it's interesting to see that T0 and TM0 curves are overlapping. But even more interesting is the fact that T1 and TM1 are also overlapping. So in this is the range of width. So if we have a rib width of 1.65 to 1.85 micrometer, so it is possible to design waveguides that supports two pairs of modes with minimum birefringence. And sorry, this is the minimum birefringence that was measured. Another interesting thing I've mentioned here, this waveguide is along y direction, whereas this waveguide is along z direction. So you can see there is an anti-crossing here, which means the hybridized modes are present, whereas in this case, it is not present. And to highlight the importance of anisotropy in LN, you can just see that the graphs are very, very different. So it's the same waveguide with the same dimension. It's an X-cut waveguide. It's just that the wave propagation is along y direction here, whereas the propagation is along z direction here. And you can see that the properties are so very different. And why is that happening? So you can see here, so the current waveguide has the propagation along y. This is the principal axis y. That's why it's called as y propagating ln, which means the TE mode, which has a dominant horizontal component, will see an extraordinary index. Along Z, the extraordinary. Along vertical direction, which is our TM mode has a dominant component along vertical direction, and it will see an ordinary index. But if you go for Z propagating waveguides, then both X and Y, which is TM and TE, both types of polarizations will experience the same index. There is no anisotropy or birefringence experienced by any of the polarizations in this case. So that's why the properties are very different when you go for Y propagating or Z propagating waveguides. So this is one method of achieving minimum birefringence. We have also used another method, which is by opting for off-axis wave propagation. So you can see here that the principal axis of LN as well as the coordinate axis of waveguide are aligned with each other. It is also possible that this is the principal coordinate system, but you have a waveguide coordinate system which is not aligned with this. So in this case, there will be an abrupt direction of propagation. So it will not be along any of the principal axis like this. For example, the wave propagation direction is making some angle phi with the optic axis. In such cases, we say that there is off-axis propagation. And by controlling this angle, it is once again possible to control birefringence. So this work was presented at IEEE IPC recently. So some fabrication tolerances. So the rib width, you can see that the design is pretty much tolerant to rib width, sidewall angle variations, but it is sensitive to edge depth variations, and it has a reasonable bandwidth as shown here. So we also extended our analysis to figure out if it is possible to design a waveguide with zero birefringence, even if it changes the sidewall angle. For example, from a very slanted sidewall of 75 degree to an ideal case of 90 degree sidewall. So we could see that there are always rib widths which you can choose so that you achieve minimum birefringence. This is the same result for between the first order mode pair. This is another analysis which shows the edge depth and rib width and the measure of birefringence. So it's once again possible to choose an edge depth so as to achieve minimum birefringence. But the problem is design is a bit more sensitive to edge depth when compared to all other parameters. It's the same result for delta N1. So what we could do with all this is we have also demonstrated one particular application of zero birefringence waveguides. What we could do is a polarization independent two-mode multiplexer or a demultiplexer. For those who are not aware, so this is the multiplexing operation. For example, this is a narrow waveguide which can support only one mode. By one, I mean both T0 as well as TM0. This is a broader waveguide which can support two pairs of modes. And if you launch T0 here, we have designed the widths, the parameters such that the TE0 gets coupled to TE1, which means it's here, TE10. Similarly, if we launch TM0, it gets coupled to TM10. So, which means the same device can be used for both the multiplexing of TE modes as well as TM modes. So, this device is polarization independent, and we have achieved a coupling length of 23.79 and 23.53 for TE and TM respectively, which is very rare. So generally, we have a large difference between these coupling lengths, at least 5 micrometer difference, and in some cases, even more, depending on the design. So now that we have the same coupling length, the power from this waveguide couples into this waveguide, irrespective of what the polarization is. That is one application of zero birefringence waveguide. Further details can be found here. To conclude, so MDM is one of the remarkable strategies in order to meet the escalating bandwidth requirements, and it necessitates the development of few mode components for its implementation. And we have designed multi-mode waveguides which are engineered to have low dispersion, high power confinement, and we can also assist or avoid mode coupling depending on whether there are hybridized modes present or not. Another type of special multimode waveguides called zero birefringence waveguides are designed, which is done by leveraging the anisotropy property of Ln. And an application of ZVR is demonstrated, which is polarization independent or polarization insensitive to mode mux demux. And we could achieve a mode conversion efficiency of more than 96%. These are the publications into which you can look into for further details. So here is my contact, and thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open to questions now.
Thank you, Archana, for this very interesting talk that focuses on the ever increasing need for bandwidth that is currently the trend now. I'm sure it would have intrigued many people to work in similar or even different research areas. Does anybody have any questions? Archana has left. Archana, are you still there?
I'm there.
Okay, sure. Does anybody have any questions? We have time for questions. Okay, I don't think anybody has any questions. So, thank you, Archana, once again for this very interesting talk. And we would like to present this memento to you on behalf of IEEE, IISc, ComSoc, and SPS chapters.
Thank you very much, Swati.
Thank you, Archana, and we wish you all the very best for your future endeavors.
Thanks once again.